Have any of you ever wondered how schools operate behind the scenes, or how schools prepared for school in the pandemic? Well, I know many of you maybe have students in the San Bernardino School District, like nephews, nieces, grandkids, or maybe kids of your own in the school district. I'm here to inform you on how the schools prepared for the pandemic and how they operated during the pandemic. I work at Roosevelt Elementary, so I had a first-hand look at how schools prepared for the pandemic and how schools actually operated before the pandemic came to us. So school before the pandemic, there was no social distancing by students. They did not wear any masks. They weren't required. They would play in the playground together, interact face to face, and they weren't really too worried about any germs. They would share snacks together. They would share stuff off of their own trays, even though they weren't supposed to. But kids are kids, and some of them just like sharing with their friends. Same thing for staff as well. Staff would gather together, have meetings really close together. They would have lunch side by side every day around the same time. They would not really distance themselves as we do now. So that's how schools operated before the pandemic. So before the pandemic hit, it was like the second week of March. Schools were shut down on March 16th, and that was our last day on campus. So all the schools in the district, including ours at Roosevelt, we had 3 weeks to prepare materials for students, Chromebooks for students, iPads, pencils, markers. We made whiteboards out of Avery sheets. We had to make one packet for each student in the school. We had 670 students last year, so we had 3 weeks to prepare all of that. We also had to prepare iPads and Chromebooks as well for students. Some of them did have their own Chromebooks, and since the school was already handing them out for students that requested them, but many did not. Like maybe, I'm gonna say 70% of the school did not have technology, did not have internet devices. So the district made a link on their website on sbcusd.com where the students were able to order a hotspot and also a Chromebook when the schools were closed. But before the schools were closed, we were giving them the Chromebooks and the iPads. But once the sites were closed, they had another place where the parents were able to go pick up any devices, any hotspots for their kids. Spring break was actually scheduled to start March 30th to April 3rd, but we haven't been back to site since March 16th with students. So now the district is planning on the potential return to the schools for students. So what the districts are doing in all campuses and around the San Bernardino is that they're putting plexiglass around all desks so the students could keep, I guess, their germs in their own area. They're supplying all the classrooms with Clorox wipes, Lysol wipes for the teachers to use. They're also ordering plenty of masks, enough for every student on campus, every staff member on campus. Hand sanitizer is something else that they're ordering a lot of. And they're also making all the desks 6 feet apart. Before the pandemic, there was 24 students per classroom. And sometimes there was times where there was an AM session and a PM session for kindergarten. So if they had perfect attendance that day, that means there was 24 students in the morning. They would go home, and then 24 students in the afternoon. And then, so there'd be a possibility of 48 students in a classroom. So, and right now we're also calling parents to ask them what type of learning they want for their students. We're giving them 2 options, which is on the San Bernardino Unified School District website. So they can either choose a blended learning, which is 3 hours twice a week on campus, and the class size will be about half. So maybe 12 students and a teacher per classroom. Or they can do the distance learning. They can choose that option, which is what they're doing now. 100% fully online distance learning from their home. Students on distance learning cannot return for the rest of the school year. So if a parent changes their mind and says, oh, you know what, I don't think online is working for me. I want blended. No, once they, or the same thing for blended. If they don't want their students to go on campus after all, but they had already chosen blended, then they can't change their mind. They have to keep them on one or the other. So this is just an option for once it's deemed safe to return. We're still not even sure if we will return, but once we do find out when we're returning, all parents, grandparents, guardians of the students will have 1 month in advance notice. So it's not all of a sudden, okay, Monday we're going back. No, they'll have about 1 month to prepare for the return, I guess, to find their babysitters, find someone that can watch their students during those hours where they would not be at school. So like I said, the two options are blended and blended learning and distance learning. So there's actually a website, the San Bernardino City Unified School District website, where the parents can choose on the parent portal which option they want for their student, but they can also call their student's school, let them know which option they want for their student, either blended or distance. And they can either call the school's number, or like I said, on sbcusd.com there's a link for the area's parent portal where they could just log in and they could make their choice on there without having to speak it to any of us from the office. So in conclusion, that's how this, so I talked about how the schools operated before the pandemic, minimal social distancing, students never 6 feet apart, face-to-face, sharing their snacks together. Same thing for staff, they would share their snacks together with each other, coffee, I guess donuts on some days they would bring and share, and not really social distance. But during the pandemic, everything's 100% online from home. Teachers are at home, students are at home. Most of the time I work from home, but I do go in maybe twice a week occasionally to give out computers to to the students. And that's how the San Bernardino City Unified School District is planning on the potential return to students for sites. So my references right here, everything can be found on the actual district website on sbcusd.com.